Lisa Wainwright, hello. Thank you for being here. Sorry, I should say Lisa Wainwright, MBE. Thank you for being here.
Well, you can call me Mom if you like. Not at all. Lisa, it's great to see you, Steph.
Yeah.
Thank you for involving me in this podcast.
Oh no, it's a joy to have you here, and I guess the whole point around my podcast really it's called Warts and All Leadership, and the whole point is to not only, well, first and primarily celebrate people who, in my view, are completely, well, we talk about vulnerable and authentic leaders, and for me, you live, breathe, embody that, and I kind of want to celebrate that, but that you also have a very much, we talk about human first approach to leadership. All these kind of big fancy words, so we'll break them down in a bit. But for me, you live and breathe all of those kind of things, being totally authentic, rocking up completely as who you are, treating people as humans first. And I kind of want to celebrate that, but I also want to share the stories to help other people as well, because for me, it's one of the most effective ways to lead people. So I'm so grateful that you're willing to be here, because I think there's so much that we can learn from you. And I know right now you're probably going, oh God, Steph, will you just stop? Just stop bigging me up right now. I just, yeah, it's very embarrassing. But that's why you're here. That's why I wanted you to be here. So thank you very much. In my intro, obviously I talked about Lisa Wainwright, MBE, mom, but you are the CEO of the Sports and Recreation Alliance. And I wondered, before I've got a ton of questions I want to ask you. Before I crack on and ask those, it'd be great if you could just maybe introduce yourself, tell us who you are, a bit about yourself, and then I can get into probing you some more about you and your style of leadership.
Yeah, Steph, I mean, lovely intro. And just to say, you've been part of that journey of keeping me real. And just want to thank you for all your support. When we met a few years back, we've still not met, face to face because of COVID, but in terms of the support, mentoring wise, you gave me following Strength Scope, to say that is really important as an individual, as a person, but also as a leader, to have that reflection time and support. So thank you. So I'm Lisa. You don't have to call Wainwright, you don't have to say MBE at all. I'm just Lisa from Yorkshire. I'm currently the chief exec of the Sport and Recreation Alliance, as you say. And what is that? So the Sport and Recreation Alliance is really, in old terms, it's a trade body that represents all the sport and rec organisations, from football, cricket, netball, basketball, all the way down to boccia, caravan and camping, Le Band Movement of dance. So a real mixture of different organisations, and we support them as the independent voice for the sector. So lots of work, policy and government, lots of work within the sector on things around EDI, sustainability, good governance, etc. So that's what we do. And my background of being a chief exec of a number of different national governing bodies who are members at the Alliance, kind of gave me good grounding in terms of the types of things that these organisations may go through. So being there, it was 3 years anniversary just this month. So delighted, absolutely love it, and a real privilege to work there.
That's a lovely introduction, and great. And thanks for telling us about what the Sports and Recreation, Alliance does. In terms of, for just some context, it's really kind of you to say thank you to me about the support that you've had from me. And it is crazy that we haven't even met in person yet. This is just is crazy. But just for some context, and in terms of how we know each other, so about a couple of years ago, you and I were introduced by a mutual colleague from UK Sport, a brilliant lady called Claire Stibben, who introduced us. And I did a bit of coaching work with you with Strength Scope, which hopefully we'll talk a little bit about, because I know that was, like you said, quite impactful for you. I did a bit of work for your board. And then more recently, I guess the other aspect that I love about what you do is, and I know these are a couple of your strengths on Strength Scope, is your creativity and your courage to do things differently and to put game-changing things into to help the sector. You think really across the sector. And so what I've been working with you on, and again, the very brilliant Amanda Bennett, is the Alliance Management and Leadership Program. So I have been supporting you mainly with the Leading the Self module on this leadership and management program that you spotted a gap in the sector for, and over the last couple of years have been building to release it. So that's kind of how we've known each other, really. It's sort of grown from the early days of doing a bit of Strength Scope and then this program.
Yeah, and I think, that's kind of what I do as a leader. I don't have big words. What I do is have common sense, I think. And the common sense to me, having spent that time with you doing strength scope and going through my 7 strengths, and you grilling me to make sure I understood it and challenging me even further in a really good way. If I've got to be a chief exec and not gone through that process, how come? I've done lots of psych testing, but I never quite got underneath it. Yeah, I know my Myers-Briggs and all this kind of stuff, but strength scope for me really got under it. And I'm not here to sell strength scope, but what I thought was, if I've not done that, then how many people in the sector could really benefit from this? And that's when I thought, my team, they hadn't had any development program or support for about 5 years prior to me arriving at the Alliance. So I thought it's time to really look at, because all management and leadership starts with self. Everything starts with self. So if you're going to do a course around management leadership, why wouldn't you start with self? So in essence, you weren't getting away. Once I found you, you weren't getting away. So you and Amanda and Claire have been fundamental in supporting us in delivering this program. And I was at the graduation last night, actually, with the 19 who've come through the first cohort. So I've only got 2 sessions left. And we took the opportunity to celebrate, because we rarely do. We do the next thing rather than take time to celebrate what we've done. But yeah, and that's, as I say, the style is common sense in relation to, if I see something that I feel I benefited from, then I'll find a way to share it.
Yeah, I mean, you you talk like, well, it's just common sense, it's just what I do, but you pull it off though, right? You go, this is something that's really powerful for me, and wouldn't it be great if we could share this with everybody? I know lots of people have those dreams, right? But you made it happen, and brilliant to hear. I didn't realize it was a graduation recently, so that's so, because you go on a journey with these people, and they're amazing set of people to get to know. But yeah, but you pull it off. So I guess how do you make that happen then, when you, because that's quite a big dream, right? And no one asked you to do it, and arguably it wasn't even in your remit, right? It was just something you went, there's a gap here. I've benefited from this. I think other people could. How do you make that happen?
It's when worlds collide, I think. So if I think through my career, there's some examples I'll talk through to bring it to life. But in terms of the leadership program, I sit on the CEO forum for NGB. So all the CEOs get together through the forum to share good practice and provide support to each other. And there was a real desire from them that there wasn't anything in the sector on leadership. There's plenty of courses on leadership, but nothing in the sector. Now, I know leadership skills are across all sectors, but sometimes you need to apply it. I, at the same time, have been in a couple of organisations, and staff were coming through without awareness of themselves, and they hadn't got the applied side of the business, if that makes sense. So they've got degrees, they've got higher degrees. A couple of my jobs are at Loughborough University over 8 years. So you're getting students that are bloody good students, quite frankly. But in terms of that common sense, the applicability of what they were learning, it wasn't there. So what I wanted to do is to build an immersive program. And again, I probably because I learn through being involved. It's the usual, tell me I hear, show me I see, and involve me and I understand. That's pretty basic stuff, but that's what it should be about. And all I'd witnessed was lots of university courses on management and leadership, and people coming to me who were incredibly intelligent but just couldn't apply it. And then I spent my time having to apply it. So, and then once I've got that kind of vision, it's the classic. Once you've developed the vision, okay, I've got an immersive training program that doesn't exist. How do I sell it? So it's having a compelling vision that people will buy into. And it helps that over the 30 years of your career, you've done this a few times. So it builds momentum. If Wainwright says, this is a really good idea, this is what we've developed, some people will jump on board. Some people have gone, no chance, not for me. But kind of that's how it's developed. So say some other examples, very, very similar. So when I was head of volunteering at Sport England for a number of years, and this was when the word volunteer wasn't used in sport. Okay. So you would never use the word volunteer. It was always a coach, a referee, a secretary, fixtures secretary, etc. You weren't, this is a long time ago, it's about 15, 20 years ago, 2005. And I was head of volunteering. There was about 21 different organisations in sport saying they were leading on volunteering. And there was a huge crisis in volunteers in sport. So I just thought, this doesn't feel right. And because I was at Sport England, it didn't feel appropriate to drive it because I was one of those organisations. And I think in leadership terms, sometimes you can lead from the front, sometimes you can lead from behind, and sometimes you know when you're leading without leading, if that also makes sense. You'll have the right theory behind this, but you know what I'm saying. So I decided to call all the 21 organisations together. I decided to employ an MP to be the chair of something that I invented called the Sports Strategic Partnership for Volunteers. Just pulled it out the hair because it sounds sexy. We had all the meetings at Westminster, and because people want to meet at Westminster, everybody came. Because there was an MP involved, everybody came. And because it wasn't me driving it, we managed to develop a collaborated framework for volunteers with the voluntary sector. So there's a whole cohort of volunteers out there and volunteer centres and everything else. And huge amounts of investment at the time was going in through the Home Office, but sport wasn't seen as voluntary. Yet there were 6 million volunteers in sports. So anyway, create a title, bring somebody with profile, get an arena where people want to go to, and then drive a vision. We can do this better together. That's kind of that style of leadership that I've just tried to do all the time. And I know it comes back to strength scope, relationship building. I know you're going to say, and how do you strength scope? And I didn't know that, and I wouldn't have done until you gave me the words to describe it. It was just, that's how I work. I bring people together with common challenges and try and find a solution together.
I love you. You're brilliant. I know it's strength scope. For me, it's common sense, but I know it's strength scope. I know that's what you're going to say. No, Lise, it's a really lovely example. And, you know, you talked about leading without leading, you know, and you just described that beautifully there. You know, actually it was about getting the right people in the room, getting in the right location, but the kind of what I think that shows, right, it's not only your strengths, by the way, which I wrote down here just to remind myself, you know, of what your strengths were, but absolutely it's relationship building, it's the leading, it's the developing others, it's the creativity. I think there's a bit of courage there as well, getting an MP involved, because again, it just comes off, you're just like water off a duck's back. Yeah, I got an MP involved, you know, we should do, you know, all of that sort of stuff. But actually that's quite strategic as well, I suppose, in a sense, but it's strategic without having a strategic mindedness strength, which I think is useful to bring up here and relevant because of the conversation we had about that. You know, you're strategic by using your relational strengths, not necessarily using a thinking strength, a strategic mindedness. So sorry, you look like you wanted to say something there. What were you responding to?
You're supposed to be strategic as a chief exec. That's why you get paid the money. You've got to be strategic. And on every job description from manager up, you've got to be a strategic thinker. And when my strength scope came back and I wasn't heavy on the thinking, I was like, oh, am I all right? And then we had this conversation. Actually, yeah. And I think I would call it tactical. Yeah. It is tactically bringing people in at times when you know you're not the right person. So I've done this again many times, and it's also being aware that it's not about brand, Lisa. I don't care whether people know involved or not. I don't care. I care about the outcome. The outcome of getting more volunteers involved in sport to get more people active was more important than whether Wainwright sat around a table with an MP in Westminster. And I think I think there's and that's why collaboration will work if you've got a level of trust with people, and it's not logos, it's not about the organization, it's about the outcomes collectively for those organizations. And again, that's what I've tried to do in a whole host of different things that I'll try and bring in as a storytelling kind of example through some of the things I've done. But for me, it's the tactical. And often you want to just keep driving it, but tactically you need to just step back, get somebody else to lead it for a certain period of time, or sometimes all the time. Just step back and observe that style of leadership from others, even though you may well be controlling it in the background. And sometimes you have to step in. But they're different tools that you would use at different times. So another example, so what happened in COVID with the sector, we desperately worked with the sector to try and give people that 1 hour to exercise. You know, there was a strong desire not to allow people out for that hour, and the sector was lobbying very hard, as was the Department of Culture, Media and Sport, to keep that hour, as well as closing activity. The last thing that closed was sport, and the first thing that opened was sport. There was a huge amount of work in the background, and I just sat back, and there was a lot of select committees around sport at the time, and I kept watching all the chief execs and listening to us all. So there's representative bodies from the LGA, the Local Government Association, SIMSPA, the Chartered Institute for Sport Management, New Sport Trust, UK Active, the commercial side, Sport England, us, Scott and Rec Alliance, Sport Joint Coaching, and we're all actually saying the same thing. We just represent different parts of the sector. And I just thought, this is bloody stupid. We're all spending all this time talking to MPs when actually one of us could talk on behalf of us all. So I made up a term again called the NSPG, the National Sector Partner Group. I phoned the chief execs up. I said, Hugh, Ali, Tara, look, we can do this better. We really can do this better. I can't do all the interviews that are coming forward from the press. Would you take it? Now, never would the SRA say to UK Active or you Spot Trust, do some interviews, do the Telegraph for me, can you do BBC, can you do Sky? And never would they say that to me, but why not? We are actually all focused on the same outcomes. The customers may be different, but the outcomes are the same. So we formed the NSPG, National Sector Partner Group. You would think I should chair it. Not for me to chair it. Hugh's far stronger and better at that than I would be. So I do the secretariat side of it in terms of making sure we're up to date and keeping people in the loop and coordinating things. So again, it's just an example of collectively we can drive much bigger outcomes for our cause than individually. And there's no threats involved at all in terms of the level of trust that we've built. And it's created also a network for the CEOs also to support each other, because being a CEO is quite a lonely world actually. And if you haven't got the support through the chief execs, and we always meet fortnightly on a Friday afternoon, and it's that Friday afternoon, we made it. What's next week? What battle have we got next week? In a really nice way, but you need that. Some people, think chief execs, you're fine, you just plow ahead, everything's great. Actually, sometimes it's bloody hard work, and you need that support around you. So again, just another example of leading but not leading, and I'm sure you're gonna have a better word of that to say what it means. Influencing, I'm guessing, is going to be the word.
You keep saying this about me, and I'm like, Lisa, I have no idea. I think you're describing it brilliantly. It's fine, but I guess what I heard you, these are lovely examples. There's a few things I was writing down. I was trying to write down while staring at you, but write down on the page, and hopefully I can read my words I wrote. But I wrote down a few words. I wrote down human behaviour, trust, and understanding people. And what it strikes me there, and there's a little bit about you sitting back in these situations, but leading nonetheless, and like you call it, controlling from sort of like the backstage. You didn't say backstage, it's controlling from behind. But what it strikes me is you call of these sort of tactical things. But I think I think you have a real understanding of human behavior and human beings and what it means to be human, right? Because and because of that, and because the relationships you build with people, and because it's not all about you, which you're very clear, and you can see that it's living and breathing. It's how do we, well, even just what you were saying about being a CEO and how lonely it is, and actually, we're not these super mega power human beings. We are human beings, and we feel stuff, and it's not always easy. So I think there's that reality that you strike there. So I'm going all over the place because there were so many bits in there that you just said, but there's this just understanding of human beings and not position. And so you treat people like that. So your colleagues who are other CEOs, let's just name it. Sometimes it's hard. Let's get together rather than trying to put on this fake act that I should, because I think when you get to a CEO level or senior positions, somehow something in your head tells you, well, you should know everything by now, and everyone's going to expect you to, and you don't. You're still a human being, and that kind of shines out loud and clear from what you just said.
Somebody once said to me, a chief exec said to me, right, battle on, royal face on. And I thought, oh yeah, I've got to remember when I get to CEO, I've got to have a royal face. Now, I've met a few royals. That's not bragging. It's just part of the job. You get to meet royals. Very, very privileged to meet them. And when you get to meet royals, you can act how you are supposed to act with all the regulations that you're given and what to say and how to say it, which is very respectful. Or you can be yourself. Now, you can expect which route I went down. And I got so much more from the conversations and time I've had with the royals, as did the royals from their discussion with me, because it's continued as well. And I thought, no, you shouldn't need to have a royal face. You should have your own face. And a real example of this, I got asked to do a panel for women in something or other. And they asked me for a photo shot, the photo shot and the biography. So I sent the photo of me swimming with my kids and my wife. And they said, oh, have you not got a suited photo shot, a profile one? I said, yes, but if you use it, I won't do the panel. because I wasn't allowing them to edit out my wife and kids, because being a leader, some people have wives, some have husbands, some have kids, some don't. But it was really important that they saw the whole self of me, not just this suited and booted Wainwright, that they were going to edit things out. And I tried to keep that. And likewise with the royal face, I don't wish to have a royal face. I want to have a human Lisa face, because people will reflect that. If I give you so I can talk to you about leadership and transformational leadership and inclusion and all this kind of stuff, or if I go, Christ, it's bloody hard, but we get through it, you will get more back. And for me, that's the natural state to be in.
Yeah, and I totally love that, because again, I don't know if it's courage, confidence, values, whatever. I'm not sure what it is that drives you in that, but what I see in other people would be, it would take real courage for them to go, no, here I am, warts and all, or whatever. Here am I. I'm not in suited booted. I don't look perfect. This is me. I wanted to talk to you about open water and swimming, because you went this morning, didn't you?
Yeah,
we haven't chatted about that.
Yeah.
It looks fine. It looks fine. It looks totally fine. Doesn't matter if it didn't anyway. But for me, I think a lot of people,
it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. But you know, yeah. So I love that you went back to them saying so strongly that you have this picture, or I'm not coming, because this is really important to me. So you know, what does that take something of you to do that? Do you like, no, I'm just, God.
I just got sick of seeing, you know, I've worked on international boards and things, and I got sick of seeing the same photos of all the same people in the same colour jackets, and which is great. If you want to wear a blue jacket and a white shirt, that's fine. But not everybody wears blue jackets and white shirts. Some people wear lots of colourful stuff. Some people wear traditional dress. Now, why wouldn't you? If what you wear around and you want to be in the most comfortable thing, respectfully, in the environment that you can be. Yeah. And so that's what I've always challenged. And it's really important that, you know, I show that I've got kids. A lot of women and men actually feel that you can't progress because you've got kids. I had a question the other day on a panel about, you know, somebody was wanting to have children but wanted to move up the career ladder. And I said, well, go for it. It made me a better person. I just about managed to stay awake, quite frankly, with them. But it made me reflect even more when I went through the journey of having children. And it makes me even more human having them. And you know, a lot of my staff have just had babies. Actually, they're COVID babies that are popping out everywhere. And you know, some of the things that have been going on that everybody listening will have gone through. I think had I not had kids, I would have been a bit, get online now, I need to talk to you, rather than, oh yeah, baby's crying again, or whatever might be happening in the background. So that's why I won't edit them out, because it's important that you see the whole of the individual.
Yeah, no, and presumably they took that photo, did they? And you were able to, yeah, good. Oh. Good. but I love that, and you know, as part of I just want to stay on this topic for a little bit. I've got a few questions in my head that I'm like, don't forget to ask this. But you know, I love this topic, and there's something that you do really well, and you also do it as part of the Alliance and Management Leadership program. You come on and talk about vulnerable leadership, and you know, we talk about vulnerable, and it's a funny old word, vulnerable, because it almost has this negative undertone, you know, feeling vulnerable, doesn't it? But actually, and almost like, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but almost like it's I don't know, but you, for me, it's you embody that, but it's just about being open. I think this is what I'm saying. It's not necessarily about being vulnerable in the sense of it's almost like it's bad to be open, so you feel vulnerable. Do you know am I trying to articulate? I'm to articulate this very well. You are just open, and you're just like, this is who I am. And for most people, they probably feel vulnerable by sharing a lot of that. And you talk openly about it, and you talk about this. I just wondered, can you more articulately and beautifully than I just did?
No pressure.
No, well, you can't listen. You're starting from quite a low starting point.
I can do it through examples if that helps.
Tell me about what you talk about when you talk about vulnerable leadership, because you're beginning to piece this together already, and I think we're already talking about it. But yeah, please talk to me about that and how you see it and why you see it as important. You know, why do we even bother this? Why are you even bothering to make sure people know you have a wife and have got kids? And I know we've talked quite a lot about you being a cancer survivor as well, and you share that story very openly, you know, and tell me all about your perspective on that.
I think we're all vulnerable. I think we all have insecurities, every single one of us. And what I found in life is the more confident somebody is, the more vulnerable they are. And the art to unlocking that is to share vulnerability. And I've been through, whether it's IVF, whether it's cancer, whatever it is that you go through in life, if you share it, I guarantee people will share back. And that depth then of understanding and relationship you have with that individual goes into stratosphere. It just goes into a different place, because you built not just a transactional relationship, you built an understanding and empathy with each other. And from that, once you've got that foundation, you can do anything together, quite honestly. And that's not a tactic, that's just normal for me, because people talk about work-life balance. I've banned that from the office because it's life-work balance. Life is more important than work. So I'm very clear. I've stopped talking. They don't talk about staff. They talk about the team. We're a team of people. We're not staff. We're not just employees. No. So there's lots of things around a people-first organisation, as I say, a human-first organisation. Some real simple things. Things around if you get up and you just feel shit, but we do sometimes, we get up and we just go, it's not happening for me today, then just don't come to work. Just don't come in, get on the train and come in and sit at your computer, and whatever's going on, just don't bother, because it's not worth it. Try and resolve it. Obviously, if you've got meetings and you've got really important things to do, you have to make sure that you get cover or whatever else. But ordinarily, it's a normal day to day and it's just not working, then seriously, it's only one day of your life and the company. And on a Saturday, if you go, oh, my head's spinning and I need to get all this done, I need to start, that's also fine. If you want to work on a Saturday or a Sunday, super duper. So it's just understanding that sometimes we're in a good place and sometimes we're not in a good place. And I think coming back to the vulnerability that we were talking about, I think once we know people, you feel more safe to be vulnerable, but it takes somebody. It took the first person to say I'm gay for the rest of us to come out. It takes the first person to talk about racism for the next one to feel comfortable to challenge it, to call it out. And I've been really lucky. I came out when I was 17. It didn't go particularly well to start off with, but because I came out quite early, I've always then been out, because it's difficult to go back in the closet once you're out, quite honestly. And I've never really rammed it down anybody's throat. I've just been Lisa, and I've been really clear. That's one element of me that happened to like women. And one day I might like men, so I've not said that's it, but at the moment it's women, and I've got a wife. But I think through that and then sharing that, it just showed me that if I can share it, others can. And lots of people at university came out once they knew the people that were out. But it comes back to strength scope, because I will keep coming back to it, because you gave me the words, and I think it was Brené Brown that said you can't get to courage without going through vulnerability. So somewhere, and if you did a psych on me, somewhere early on in my life, I must have gone through vulnerability to give me the courage to get to where I am. I can't understand it in any other way than that's how it feels. And again, coming back to basics, I love an artist. I'm going off on one here, but I love an artist called Mackenzie Thorpe. My daughter's called Mackenzie because of him, and he's famous for doing originally pictures of children with massive heads, with big smiles, huge head, small body, big smiles, and big bobber boots, big black Doc Martin boots. And he talks about the reason he has the children like that, because children, the world, once you're born, the world suddenly tells you can't do, gives you insecurities, and you're not as good as the other, you don't look great, you don't do this. But as a kiddie, there's all these possibilities, and that's why the smile is so big. And the boots, they're so big and grounded because it's to remind you to remain grounded, no matter which role you've met, no matter which Olympic Games you've been to, how much you earn, what car you drive, stay grounded. Stick to your beliefs. And my belief is that everybody's equal. And that's one of the principles that I stick to. I will treat anyone I meet as equally as the next one, and treat them fairly. Does that help on the vulnerability? I don't know if it helps on the vulnerability front.
Massively helps. And actually, you just said so many things there. And throughout this conversation, we've only been going 40 minutes ish. you've sent shivers down my spine 2 or 3 times when you've talked, because you've said something so powerful. And again, I know you're kind of going, it's just me, it's just what I'm saying, but there's been a few things I've just gone, wow. And it's really distracting, because then I'm in this moment going, no, you need to ask Lisa another question, but I'm like, oh my God. But yes, it does answer my question around vulnerability, because what I heard you say there is that when you were younger, teenage years, 17 is when we're almost most worried about whether we fit in or not. It's when we're most worried about what people think about us. And at that point, you then went, well, I'm going to tell people. And that's huge for anybody. It's huge at 17. But I think what you learned in that lesson was people's reaction to you. So, okay, you said it didn't go completely brilliantly, but what I'm hearing is it also went quite well in terms of the connection and what it enabled other people to do. And I think as you were talking there, a number of your values came out. So, you made the link with what Brené Brown said is courage, the link between courage and vulnerability. And you think that's maybe where your courage came from. And I'm really glad we're talking about Strength Scope. And for me, it's not about trying to sell it. It's just trying to talk about what it did for you. And actually, courage is one of your strengths. So it is one of your natural strengths. And actually, the thinking behind the tool is that strengths start to kind of really form in our late teenage years, and then stick with us. So my feeling is you probably always had courage, but it maybe just got kind of accelerated in that moment because you got some evidence in real life around what having courage enables you to do. But also what I know about courage from working with Strength Scope and the tool and people who have got it is, and also thinking about strengths and values are very much linked, and particularly courage is linked to a value of fairness and equality. So you couple that with your leading strength, and it doesn't surprise me that at 17 you were doing what you were doing there and leading the way, being vulnerable, being courageous to say I'm gay, and encouraging other people to do and getting joy and fulfillment out of other people doing it. You're doing it now in other ways as well, aren't you? Right. So with the leadership programs, all the examples you gave at the beginning around having the courage to get MPs involved, or the courage to change things and seeing the benefit that's having others. Does that feel right? Because that's what I see is this combination of you, almost what drives you to make some of these courageous decisions is the impact it's having on other people, to help other people, to give other people a voice or a chance to speak up.
Absolutely, and you've hit the nail on the head. Another example which will just relate to exactly how you've summarised it was I got a phone call to ask if I would become the chief exec of British Basketball, and I could talk you through all the recruitment stuff you're supposed to do. No, I got a phone call and I was asked, would I want to be the chief exec of British Basketball that had no money, was in disarray, and the chair was about to leave, but would I become chief exec? Had no money, and there were 8 teams committed to competition. So most people would go, on your chuffing Nelly, no, because this is a balls up. And you've got to bear in mind, I used to be head of sport at Sport England and commissioned 2 reviews on basketball, which is a phenomenal sport, but governance-wise has always had challenges and still does. But anyway, so stupidly, I took the job, and I took the job because I believe that basketball, out of all the phenomenal sports and recreational activities we have, is the one that can really transform people's lives with more reach than most of the others. And I felt it had been treated as a sport unfairly for about 30 years, and I'd got the evidence. I've been part of the system to prove it, and I thought, you know what, Wainwright, it's time that you gave this sport as much as you can to change the system. So anyway, so I took the job. I had 7 chairs in 2 years. And the story goes, one resigned when I started, one died, and the rest left quickly enough when they realised how difficult it was. It was hard, really hard. But what I had to do was and this is the courage bit, I think it was the most stupidest thing I ever did, but the most courageous and right thing I ever did. Mm-hmm. I had to fight the government's policy that had been incredibly successful from an Olympic and Paralympic point of view. And I had to fight it because there was an element of the sector that was being dismissed, of which it was culturally very different than any other part of the sector, if you understand what I'm saying. So I had to fight people that I'd worked with for 20 years. And by fight, I mean really work bloody hard to change the policy. I had to fight government. I had a very small team. At the time, I was a director of the British Olympic Association, so I was a director of the organisation that was driving this forwards. But it was wrong. It was wrong that some people, just because of the sport that they chose to take part in, that spoke to them and they could access because it wasn't expensive, wasn't treated in the same way as others. And the courage was, you don't do that lightly, and it made me very ill, very, very ill actually. But what it did do, it empowered the sport. We brought all the people together. I remember having a Westminster Hall debate on basketball, and 30 kids from Barking Abbey School came, 30 black kids, predominantly black, in Westminster. Can you imagine what that looked like?
Brilliant.
Yeah, they didn't know where to put themselves, all the officials. And it changed. The minister, Tracy Crouch, listened. She gave some funding, and then thankfully, within a year, the policy changed and development sports came in, and they still exist now in terms of giving that step up in funding to start that performance journey. Now, I say there's clearly a group of people behind me. It's not always me, but it took courage. In that point, I had to lead it. There's nobody else to lead that. But again, it comes back to fairness. It was wrong. It has always been wrong in terms of how people have dealt with basketball. And it's all down to prejudice and unconscious bias. And I felt it was time that should be challenged. So I did. And funnily enough, now the new Sporting strategy is very different, and UK sports is very different. But that was a really uncomfortable phase. And I say the stress of it made me very ill, and we can talk about the other stuff a bit later. But I couldn't get away from that fairness. It's just something that I had to do. And I'm very proud that I did, really, really proud of what we did as a group to get that changed.
I mean, it's a phenomenal achievement. I mean, you know, it's sort of bittersweet, isn't it? Because it a phenomenal achievement, and just a joy to listen to you describe what you did and what was important to you and how you did it. And but then the kind of the downside of having that impact on you, making you very ill, you know, it is kind of bittersweet. So I sort of sat here going, God, I want to celebrate that. I want to ask you about that as well, you know, the bit that broke you. But let's that was my words, broke you said just very ill, you know, but I mean, thank you for sharing that. Let's hold the thought on what that did to you for a second. Just I guess, how long was that kind of process? I'm really intrigued. How long from, you know, kind of beginning to see, right, this is wrong, something wrong here?
Yeah, 2 years.
2 years. Wow.
2 years, yeah. And I don't genuinely, I admire people who can continue at that pace for longer, because I couldn't, and we can talk about what happened. But yeah, 2 years, and you know, without a lot of money behind you, there wasn't a lot of money. I hadn't got a lot of staff. I'm not from the sport. I'm from netball, which is horrific. And netball, I'm working in basketball. It was really, really challenging, but I just had the lens that I had to get this changed. And no matter how many bruises I got or punches I got, how broke I got, you know, I got the sellotape, I got the super glue, I was carrying on, and I was going to win. It was that much focus that got me through. And I didn't realise that till I ended it, till we got the money and the policy changed, and then I came through the circle. I hadn't realised that's the impact it has. And then I wrote a journey, and I share that with students and things around, you know, having a vision, how you drive it forwards, and empowering and changing policy and things. But as I say, I couldn't let it go. Once I get something, I can't let it go, which can be a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, often both, isn't it? Well, it can often be both, can't it? And that sounds like you got the change you wanted, but at what cost, I suppose. And I guess the question I have in my mind, I'm not even sure if I want to ask it, but I'm going to ask it. You know, when you look back now on that time, having seen the cost of what happened, I mean, what I hear really loud and clearly is this drive, and this is important to me, and I've got to make this happen. I've got to make this change. And I think that's what makes you great, right? It's what makes you able to deliver so many of these changes, and the courage to take on things. And at one point you were saying, I'm fighting myself because I'm the director of the Olympic Committee, one of the directors of the Olympic Committee. Yeah, but also I'm at basketball, and so I'm kind of challenging myself. You know, that's no mean feat. I'm not surprised, you know, it broke you, because, and I think about all the relationships that's really important to you, that it must have been really challenging around some relationships and stuff. So I imagine, I don't know, but I imagine it must have been.
To say, back off or your career is ended. And my response was, if I don't continue, I don't wish to be in this sector. I.e., if this sector is this bad, I don't want to be part of it. And that was one director and one chief exec from very big organizations. That was the conversation they had. Back off. Now that to me is, that's bullying. That's wrong. The policies were wrong and they were all just staying where they were. So I didn't back off. And as I say, it took quite a while. But if you fundamentally know that something is wrong, you have to fight for it. I can't see it in any other way. And I say that because of all the things that people have fought for in the past that gives us the privileges of life that we have today. And that's I guess where my leadership style comes from, and again, treating people fairly, talking about life, not work. That's what's important.
Yeah, it's incredible that you had what helped you? Because for most people, if someone said back off or this is your career ending, they would recoil and go, shit, okay, no, that's it, I'm not going to, because these are quite senior people, right, who are saying career ending stuff. How did you navigate that? How did you have the strength to kind of to stick to, because it's one thing to say, no, this is wrong and it must change, but there's another thing to say, this is wrong, it must change, and I'm going to change it and I'm going to stick to it. I don't care what you're saying. How did you galvanize the kind of, that's quite a good word, isn't it? How did you galvanize that kind of strength to?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I talk about quite a lot is the personal boardroom with Dr. Zella King, which is if people listening are watching have not used it. So I have a personal boardroom of people around me that I utilize at different times. So there's anchors within there, there's challengers, etc. And at that point, I had people I had to go to for support, significant support, and it was the anchors that were saying, Wainwright, what you're doing is right. We'll stand behind you. Not stand in front of you. We'll stand behind you because what you're doing is right. And somebody's got to do that. So I got to the stage of, if I stop now, what's the last 18, 19 months been? What's the point of it? You've had a salary and you've achieved what? A lot of stress, a lot of upset. So it got to the point, you start the ball rolling. When the ball gets so fast, you will get there. It's just time. If I was the casualty of that process, it didn't worry me at all. I would always find a job. If not, I'd make the wife just get promoted and she could earn more money, so that's fine. So I think that's where I got to. What was difficult was because they were friends, because I'd been in the sector for a long time. But then I thought, what, would I sit in a bar with friends that didn't think the same as me in terms of the ethical side of things, the fairness side of things? And I wouldn't. I wouldn't sit with a homophobe in a bar for a night socially. I'd try and influence them to change their views, but I wouldn't socialize with them continually. And I thought, well, they're not friends if they're not thinking about the impact of their decisions more broadly from a fairness perspective. Then this is where the future is, as a future group of friends. And those kids at Barking, who I may never see again, but they will remember that day in Westminster. They will remember the impact, because I went down afterwards and explained to them and shared what impact them taking that day off school to spend time with crossbench MPs to show that this is how important this sport is. That's what kept driving me. I kept looking at the outcome, and every time I looked at it, it reinforced, you've got to keep doing it. And actually, you know what it's like, if somebody shows their true color, if they're phoning you to say back off, Wainwright, they're scared because you're winning. So I knew once that happened, I was about to get the right outcome, because when a sector starts to turn on you, there's a huge threat, isn't it? But if they were supporting you, say, actually, I agree with you, carry on. And quite a few people were doing that in the background as well.
Right. Yeah. And so it sounds, again, I keep coming back to this really understanding people, and kind of going, so you understood that message from them was them being scared, and it meant, there's a real positive spin on that. It's like, I'm going to listen to the meaning behind this conversation rather than just the words. So you're telling me back off. But what I think that means is I'm getting close. There's a real positive spin on that. It's like, what that means is this, and it's fine, I'll sort everything else out if it does end that, but this is more important. And the other thing was this point about what kept me going was seeing the end result and seeing what could happen and what could really, the reasons why I'm doing this, that's kind of kept me going. and there's something else I was going to say, but it's gone out of my head. But it's definitely struck me about that was it, about the personal board. So, you know, the understanding and seeing beyond the words, but then actually what people don't see, right, with CEOs, going back to the very beginning of our conversation, is you know it's really important to have your supporters. You call it the personal board, you know, personal development board, whatever board, you know, it's all the people who understand you, know you, support you, tell you I've got your back. It's having those voices. That's what I'm hearing you say, how important it was to almost like, you know what you need. You know what you need, isn't it, to keep you going, and you get those, and you know what you need from different people. It's this, I mean, I'm putting words in your mouth, but what I'm guessing is to have a personal board, having people to go to, so much you've got this awareness of yourself that at tough times or in any time, you know what you need to help drive you on, or to help you be the best version of yourself. You know, is that fair?
Yeah, so it's a personal boardroom, because we talk boards, people think it's your board. It's not my board. It's very deliberately not my board. That's very separate. So it's a boardroom of very diverse people, some in sectors, some outside sectors, some who know me, some who don't know me, but at different times. So one of them is a nerve giver. So when I'm absolutely shitting myself to do something, I go blah blah blah, and they'll go, well, you've done it before. I go, I know I have, but I need you to tell me that. Talk me through it. And then there's another one that there's a coach within there that'll say, okay, let me sit you down. Well, let's role play it. There's another one that's an anchor. I'm sinking, I'm drowning, I don't know where I'm at. Okay, let's just stabilize you, Lise. Let's just talk. So there's lots of different people with lots of different roles. There's one that I just tend to go to and go, oh my God, I don't know. I just haven't got a clue with this one. I don't quite know where I'm coming from on it. If it's an idea, can you articulate it better than me and create what I can see a vision, but I can't describe it. Can you help me?
Yeah.
So there's all these different people that I don't pay, other than lots of coffees, teas, and sometimes wine, to help me, because, you know, as a person, you haven't got everything. You never will. You will never have every single skill, every single piece of knowledge that you need. So for me, that extension, those 12 roles, those 12 people, are what makes me a much better person and a much better leader, because you've got 13 of us, actually, not just me. And I continue to use it. I say, Ella King, look it up online. It's brilliant. I love it to bits. Nearly as much as Strength Scope.
Good, very good shout. But what I also love there is and this is what comes out loud and clear from you, is you're just very real and very normal, and you use your normal speak. So even when you're talking about a normal speak, that's not even normal speak. you use what's real to you. And what I mean by that is, when you talk about the personal development board, you talk about the nerve, the person I go to for the nerve, or the coach, or there was somebody else, and there was someone else who you talked about, the anchor, and then someone who I think you're kind of talking as like a clarifier, like someone who clarifies. But the words you use, I don't know if they're the words that are on the actual thing, but if they're your words, like, I love that, the nerve. It's like, I need someone to give me are they your words, some of them?
No, they're Dr. King's. So it's nerve giver. So that's and the picture is a vaccination injection, if you like, syringe. There's a challenger, there's the anchor, which is a picture of an anchor. I'm a visual learner, so there's 12 cards, and you write on the back of the arm. You can do it online, but I have little cards. In fact, I will show you. I'm going to show you now while we're talking, just so that I'm not full of bull bubba. So this is it. Not advertising, but there you go. And you can see their little cards. And for me, it was you can get the book, but really simple: a connector, navigator, and others. And what I've tried to do, as you would expect me now to say, is when people come to me for support, I can then see from this articulation of what type of support, what they wanted from me. Do I need to be the nerve giver? Is it that they're coming for me for connections and network? Is it that they need a challenger because they're cruising in their career and want to know about next steps or challenge themselves? So it helps me in a framework to think through what support they may need as well.
Because sometimes people don't know, they just kind of go, Lisa, I think you could help me, would you help me? You're like, well, you know, how, what do you need from me? And that, great, I love that. So I understood the concept of the personal boardroom, but I hadn't seen that particular one. So I guess that's really interesting, and great that they've got some cards too. Totally blows my point out the water around you just using your real words, but you know, the words that mean to you.
The word simple, and I always say I'm from Yorkshire, and I have to keep them simple. So I'm not academic, and I try not to be academic, and sometimes that's that's at fault as well. It's my area that I shy away from, but my strengths are to keep it real. So I've continued to do that.
Yeah, no. So in our conversation, we've talked quite a lot about your beliefs, like the belief of fairness and equality. We've talked quite a lot about your strengths, and we talked about the support that you have around you. What would be great to hear from you about is, we talk about human first leadership, and you gave a really lovely example very early on in terms of, listen, if you're having a shit day, don't come to work. Be responsible, make sure you sort things out. So you're not leaving anybody, letting anybody down or leaving anything, but it's fine. I recognize you're a human being. I wonder if you could just talk to me a little bit more about what you believe in terms of leading a team and getting the best from people, and what helps you get the best from people, because I think we've had a lovely conversation around making change happen through the relationships you have and through leading and through belief. When you're you're galvanizing, there's that word again, teams around you, but and as a CEO within your organization, how do you get the best from people? How do you encourage that? How do you make sure that's going through the organization? Because it's quite hard. I will let you answer in a second, but it's quite hard to say, look, if you're having a shit day, don't come in. It feels really obvious and normal and common sense that we're human beings, but there's a lot of people who never say that. Say that to their employees. So I suppose the question is, talk to me about what you believe and about getting the best from people, and how you go about getting the best from people and leading in this kind of what we call this human first way, but just in the Wainwright way.
in the Wainwright way. So I'm a trained teacher and got a master's in learning and teaching. So it's all about how do we learn, how do we empower people. And I think for me, in terms of the leadership and how I work with the team that I currently have, although it's been the same throughout my whole career, is around the words that theory will say, is about that idealized kind of influence. So I will role model it. So for example, if all staff have access to my online diary, Outlook diary, and it says open water swimming at Castle Ashby. Now, I've not taken the morning off. That's just me having some mindfulness time for an hour in a lake, which I hope my staff would feel very comfortable if they wanted to go for a walk or a cycle for an hour, that's what they can do. So I'm very open that that's what I do. And again, if you start to do that in the idealized world, people will role model you. They'll start to do it as well. So if I'm open and honest about when I'm in the office, it's just not working. Can I take you for a coffee? Because I'm not with it today. Can we just go for a coffee? Not talk work. Yeah, they go, the chief exec wants coffee with me, and start to panic. And they're not, genuinely, it's about me. I'm struggling. And they go, okay. And then they settle down a little bit. So it's just being honest about yourself, and providing an environment that people can be honest back with you. So that's kind of the role modeling, leading by example. The other thing is, again, it's sharing. I talk frequently about the kids are a nightmare because one's got COVID, one's not got COVID, and I had to go pick them up, or they've got swimming 5 nights a week, and it's a disaster from a diary point of view. So it's getting out of people and understanding their individual situations and showing support in it, but also acknowledging that on an evening they may be doing work, and that's absolutely fine as well. But within all that, and there's an element of everything we do, I expect people in my organisation to want to learn. So I meet every member of staff that starts with us, I'm a member of the team. I do a one-on-one with them straight away, and I talk about life's more important than work. I give them my mobile number. I explain to them, if ever they cannot sleep because they're worrying about work, they phone me. If they can't get the line manager, they phone me, because I want them to sleep. Because our work is not that serious. It's not like my wife's work in the police. If we don't do something, somebody's not going to die. Yes, we might not get the policy right, we might not get the event colour palette right, or an email might go out late, but fundamentally it's not worth that stress. So in terms of how I approach it, it's a very one-on-one personal discussion when they start at the organisation, and we go through those individual things. We informally talk about anything they want to, whether it's if they've got caring responsibilities or not. They don't have to tell me, but if they want to, it just makes it easier to then say, of course, if you need to leave to pick up your kids or look after your mum, if Friday you need to make sure you can take her for a feet doing or whatever it might be, that's fine. So it's that individual consideration as part of the team. But I think most of it is about empowerment, and there's levels of different levels of empowerment. And an example I'll use, which horrified my chairman. So I have a very traditional chairman. Andrew used to be the chief exec of Aviva Accountancy, accountant's background. So you will understand, you'll now have an image of that. And he's a phenomenal guy. I love working with him. But I said to him, look, Andrew, he said, we need a new strategy. I said, yeah. I said, I'm going to let the managers do the strategy. He said, you what? I said, I'm going to let the managers do the strategy. He said, but you're the chief exec, you should lead the strategy. I said, no, I shouldn't, because the managers are closer to the business than I am. So I'm going to let the managers lead the strategy. And because they'd done the Breaking Boundaries precursor to the Alliance Management Leadership Programme, I had full confidence that they would do it far better than I would. I absolutely did. And you know what? They did a phenomenal strategy. They took some time. I only intervened once, and that was to ask them where they were up to, so I knew our deadline was going to be hit. But at no time did I intervene on content. And now some people think, how can a chief exec not be involved in the strategy? Well, there are some people that are far better. I talked earlier, far better than me than strategy, far better. What I'm bloody good at is getting things delivered and bringing people together. That's the relationship building. And in essence, that's the implementation of that strategic plan, which is now what we're doing. But in terms of empowering a group of managers, everybody talks about it, empower them, give them a task to do. You couldn't give them anything more important than the organisation strategy for the next 4 years, which is ours, is called the SRA, Support, Recover and Achieve. And they've done it. And I say, from there, we've now got 3 of those managers have come into senior management team at the next level for their own development, but to help drive that strategy forward. So if that kind of explains to you, there's a little bit about creating a shared vision, and that's that inspirational motivation. When you come back to Strength Scope, I've got huge energy and enthusiasm, and I could very easily have driven the strategy forwards. But actually, I didn't need to. I've done plenty of strategies in my time. I do know how to do them, but actually, it's better to develop people through that process. And that's the direction we chose. And my chairman just smirked and said, you did it, didn't you? I said, I know, I didn't get involved. He said, but you brought it through in the right way. And I think he recognised the style and approach, which is very different to what he's used to. So I think those elements are as how I lead, how I develop the team. And as I say, I don't guess it's not vulnerable leadership. I think it's more transformational, but soft transformational. It's not a big one bang. It's just constantly reinforcing those different elements.
Yeah, I wrote down a ton of words all over my page then as you were talking, because I want to bring up all the things that you just talked about there, because you're right, it's not vulnerable leadership. The first part of our conversation, that was very much about, a lot of what we talked about, vulnerable leadership and understanding yourself and sharing everything of yourself and sharing exactly who you are. This then, it's part of the vulnerable leadership bit, because you're encouraging other people to be vulnerable. That first bit, you said, I get to know everybody who comes into the organisation, and I understand them, and I want to understand them and understand their life situation. I don't want to just understand what they're good at work. I want to understand their life situation, which goes back to it's not work-life balance, it's life-work balance. And life is more important. And I think that they get that from you straight away. So I think that encourages everybody else to just rock up completely as themselves and not be ashamed if they've got, I've got to leave now because I've got caring responsibilities or whatever. You're going, no, you almost give trust straight away, right? That you're here and I'm going to trust you to do your work. But I also know you're a human being, so you've got to do it when you can and how you can, as long as you do. So I guess what I wrote down when you first started talking, you talk about role modeling. I wrote down words and actions, and I think that's one of the things that makes you different. A lot of people talk about empowerment, a lot of people talk about being open, a lot of people talk about sharing who you are and all that, but you are like, no, it's in my diary, I'm open, I'm going open water swimming, I'm not taking it off as time off, and people can see it. So throughout all of what you just said there, it's actions over words all the time. You might say these things, but your actions, well, the classic actions speak louder than words, and that is impacting other people. And the other aspect that came out a lot there was because you invest that time in understanding the whole person, you also just understand what people are capable of. I mean, you know, what you said there, the team, it's how do I articulate this? It's like you're aware of what your own strengths are, you're aware of what the team's strengths are and the individuals within that team, and you're trusting that. I mean, I was part of that pilot, right, with the breaking boundaries. So I was part of when that was shared with them and helping them understand how they use their strengths. They were shitting themselves. So like, oh my gosh, right, to doing that. But you had more belief in them than they had at the beginning. So I don't know if this is accurate or not, but it sounds like you had that belief in them because of, I don't know, because you understood them and understood where they were great, but also because you believed in their ability to learn. I don't know where that's coming from, but I think you've got this real sense of learning and helping everybody learn. I mean, what did give you that? Is that right? What did give you that belief that they could do it? Because that's pretty impressive to go, but you're quite cheeky in it as well. You're like, you know what, I'm going to give it to them, almost just to prove to everybody, look, I don't have to do it, and my team can do it, and I believe in it. So, haha, look, see, you know, it's that kind of cheeky. Oh, is this a bit naughty to do it? Do you know what I mean? So, going back to my question, what gave you that belief in them?
Because you know, we're joking about strength scope, but without strength scope, prior to strength scope, I would always analyze an individual. You meet somebody, you will analyze very quickly what are their strengths, what are their not so good strengths, what are their opportunities, what is the future, what can they add value to. So you're doing that constantly as a person who works with other people. And you know, when you're building a team, so a team of managers, yeah, you've got your technical skills, but you're also building a team of complementary skill sets. So I wasn't overly surprised when the outcomes of strength scope came through in terms of the managers. So if you look at all that, you know, again, I've got 8 people. If you sit them all together, they've got all the skills. They've not got the titles, but they've got all the skills to do the job. They may not have the confidence. They never will have the confidence if you don't allow them to do it in a safe environment. It was a safe environment because if it did go tits up, I was ready. But I had confidence it wouldn't go tits up, and that was the most important thing. So I think it's not just understanding the individual from a life perspective. It's also understanding, you know, what are their motivations career-wise. Some people don't want to go up the ladder, some people do. What really motivates them? What are their values? And I do a session with all the team once a year around a sticky note. You know, what's your vision for the next year for you? What do you want to achieve? How can I help you? And that can either be personal or professional. And I keep the stickies and I keep it in my drawer. And at the end of the year, we relook at them and then we celebrate what we've achieved or not achieved. And I've always done that because it's that you start to realize some people are really career focused. Others don't give a hoot. It's just the salary, quite honestly. I want to enjoy my job, but what's important is what I do outside of work. So there is the career element, there's the objectives and the goals and all the stuff that you've got to do in terms of business. But that's the analysis I would do. And any individual I meet, anybody I meet at a networking session, that kind of, you know, you do the scanner straight through and back. And you know exactly then at which part of your life you're going to utilize that person or how you can help them. And that's just a constant thing. It's hard work, to be fair. I go swimming to this to the Falcon Swimming Club, the lake, and I meet people I've never met before. And before I know it, I've analysed them and I'm providing support,
right,
or I've got them involved in a project I'm working on. I can't stop it. It's just that's the way it is.
Brilliant. But I think that answers beautifully why you were able to trust them, because of your understanding and because this initially this scan, like this beautiful kind of image you had of, I've scanned someone, did a little bit, and now I know kind of what's going on, but coupled with, you know, your strengths and values. And I think what struck me there as you were talking is that this is constant focus on what can I learn and how can I help, what can I learn and how can I help. And you know, when you're getting people involved in projects, it isn't about how can they help me, it's about how can I help them and how can I bring things together. And once I understand, what I'm guessing is once you understand things about people at this open swimming thing, you're going, right, wow, because I've taken the time to understand you, because it's just natural, because I love building relationships with people. I then go, that's coupled with what can I learn from you, or how can I help you? And then that's why all these connections are happening. And I guess that's then what happens in your team, because there is a big focus on understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love being in that environment that feels uncomfortable. I think that's a bit weird. It's a classic one for the swimming, because I started in March and it was 6 degrees, it was bloody freezing. But I've always, I don't know why, it's this thing that there's some part of my life I have to feel uncomfortable with. And when I left volleyball, I used to be chief exec at Volleyball England for 8 years. And when I left, the president, Harry Grasser at International Volleyball, phoned and asked if I'd go work for him. And I couldn't. My kids were 1 and 2, and my mum had just moved to live next door to me because my dad had died. And I said, look, a huge, I mean, crikey, a president phoning you and offering you a job. And I said, which job? He said, which do you want?
God, wow.
But yeah, you kind of go, what? And I'm not from, I don't have a volleyball background. I'm not a technical volleyballer. And I had to respectfully decline because there were too many other things. It wasn't the right timing for that opportunity. Anyway, the reason for the story is 2 years later, he phoned me and said, Lisa, would you become a technical director? And I was a basketball at this point, and I still know nothing about volleyball. But I said, you know what, I will. And he said, because I want women to be part of the technical directing. TD for an event is the person at the top of the tree of every single element of the event. It's the person that is the final decision maker, if you like. So anyway, you've got to remember, I don't know volleyball. I don't know volleyball rules. Despite being chief exec, technically, I'm not from the sport. And then I get asked, would I be a world technical director by the president? And everything should have told me, don't do it. You don't know what you're talking about. And everything inside me went, yeah, but it's scary. Do it, because you learn. So what did I do? I agreed to do it, became a technical director, did the training, and I was horrified. This manual this big. And then I arrived in Poland for my first appointment for the Volleyball Nations League, and I was horrified. I was absolutely petrified of everything, because, you know, you make the wrong decision and a team could lose, a player could be injured, anything can happen. But it kept me on my toes, and I learned so much by being in that environment. It's exhausting doing that, but that's just an example of I didn't have the knowledge to do it. I didn't have the knowledge to be chief exec at volleyball. I didn't really have the knowledge to be chief exec at basketball, but I had the skills to ensure I got knowledge from other people to help me get through it. And I think that's vulnerable. If you can go into an environment where everybody around you is an expert and you are not, you feel vulnerable at that point. But your vulnerability is you can learn. If you're vulnerable, oh my word, how much could I learn in that environment? And I did. I learned a huge amount in that environment. So it's a bit like a pressure tank, and every now and again I go into this pressure tank and it's like, oh, and I'm trying not to, but I've just realized that's the way I learn. That's the way I challenge myself. So I kind of accept it now.
Yeah, and actually, I think, whilst you said, I think you get energy by it though as well. You sort of said, oh, it was exhausting, but actually, I think, you know, you talk about it very energetically. One of your strengths is enthusiasm. You're very enthusiastic, but also the word came into my mind as you were talking was being open, you know, and that's what you talked about, the vulnerability. You're open to learn. And I think, you know, self-improvement, I think, yes, writing down self-improvement is one of your strengths too, which is all about this curiosity and learning and understanding. And so it's almost like what I heard you say there. We started off that story by talking about discomfort and making sure you're in situations that feel uncomfortable. And you're like, I can cope with those, or I seek them out, because it fulfills almost a need in me or a strength in me, which is to learn. It's an opportunity to learn. And that learning keeps you, I'm going to use the word humble. And what I mean by humble is that it's not about you, it's about everybody. It's about everybody else. And so you go in, like you say, is having no knowledge of volleyball, it means that you're leading people. You're having, you know, I'm open. I don't need to know. I'm not here to, and like you say, that feels really vulnerable then, because you're all the experts. And I know also in sport, it can be quite difficult being in a senior position if you're not from a sport, because there is an expectation that the senior leaders know everything. So not only are you going in, you're going in as someone who against that culture a little bit, aren't you? So you have to kind of, you're feeling vulnerable, but you have to be brave at the same time. And what I'm hearing is your strengths are almost pull you through that because of the energy you get from learning and being open.
Yeah, and for me, it's the insight of the people above. So the person who appointed me at volleyball was knowing that I had the vision for the sport. And because I wasn't from the sport, that's what would make the difference. And likewise with Harry. Harry knew damn well I hadn't got a clue about volleyball, but he knew that I'd got the leadership skills and the empowering skills to take a team of disparate global people, about 200 plus, and make sure that event operated at the right level. He knew that somehow. And, you know, I'm ever grateful that he put me through that and continues to. But as I say, you kind of step back and go, why do I keep doing this? But I do it, you're right, because it gives me the energy, gives me the drive, and keeps me on to the next thing as well.
And I suppose it's a case of knowing when you're doing it too much, and because I can hear it's that kind of bittersweet for you. You're energizing, but then you get to a point where you're questioning, why am I doing this to myself? Because at some point it gets a little bit painful almost, and it's almost like, how do I do it so it's energizing and then stop? And then stop. Not.
I remember Karina, my wife, saying to me, when before kids, we used to go on holiday, and I was usually ill on holiday, because what would happen, I would work. I just love working. I absolutely love it. And it's not really work. I just love leading, having a vision, and building people together in teams. And I'd be full on, and then we go on holiday, and I'd be ill because I'd stop. So the first 4 days of holiday, I'd be ill. Then I'd get better, and then I'd watch back at work. And we had a moment where we got to, you cannot be ill on holiday anymore. And now I've got kids, it's very different, but it was that sheer exhaustion, because I just love the energy and the drive and the challenge that gives you.
Yeah, no, it's lovely. No, it's lovely to kind of hear you talk about that. And I'm just clocking the time because it's 20 past. We've only got like 10 minutes left. I did have one last question that's sort of related to what you just said. So we'll make this the last one. So I guess there was something you said earlier which I loved, but at the same time I was always like, oh my God, Lisa, that's not looking after yourself, and the bit of me going, leaders have got to look after yourself, because you've got, I have this whole thing, you got to put your own oxygen mask on before helping others, that whole analogy of resilience and stuff. And you said something earlier when you said, if any of my team are losing sleep over work, I want you to ring me. So there's me imagining people ringing you at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, oh, that's going to impact Lisa's sleep, and how's she going to function on not much sleep? She can't do that with everybody, but what a great gesture. Anyway, so those were the thoughts were going through my head, and it's kind of related. What that's related to is there is a link. It is almost like bad days, when you have bad days, and how you manage that. So we touched on this earlier, and you could talk about this, or if it doesn't feel as relevant, we talked about having cancer, and that's relatively recently, and being a cancer survivor. And actually, you've had quite a number of health issues knocked on from that. I suppose if you were gonna, given the time, and yeah, I don't necessarily want to take up too much more of your time, but how do you cope with bad days as a leader, knowing what I know about you, caring about your team, wanting your team to do well, being there for your team? So when you're having a bad day, it must be hard for you then to, that's what I think the link is, say, if you're not sleeping, ring me. 3 o'clock in the morning, doesn't matter, ring me. But when you're having a bad day, how do you manage? How do you
cope? Really easy, because of the culture we've got. It's not all about me. So they can call me, but in my 25, 30 years of being in CEO leadership roles, only one person's called.
Right.
So whether that's because they didn't feel comfortable in calling me at 2 a.m, and that was because one of my staff had died. Right. And that's what it took that individual to call. Really, really sadly, at volleyball, which, as you can imagine, it impacted on all of us. But for me, I have confidence that culturally, we're all people focused. And I know that if I'm not around, if I'm having a bad day and I say I'm not going to be in the office or I don't feel up to it, I know that I'll get pop-ups on my email saying, you okay, just checking in, from my staff. So they will ask me as I would ask them if there's anything going on, or there'd be a text message from them. So for me, being a leader is empowering the others to lead as well, and take your space when you're not there. You shouldn't need to be there, virtually there. That means not physically always there. So there are many other people that have similar empathy and style to me within the organisation that would pick that up. So I don't feel bad, because it's not always me. They might call somebody else, and they will call somebody else. So I wouldn't worry too much about that at all. In terms of bad days as a chief exec, or as a person, yeah, I've had some really shit ones, quite honestly. So 4 days before starting this job, I got diagnosed with breast cancer, completely out of the blue. It was a right old shock, as you can imagine. And I walked out of the hospital, and I phoned Andrew, my chairman, and said, Andrew, I've got breast cancer. He said, are you in the hospital? I said, yes. He said, have you told anybody else? I said, no. He said, right, put the phone down and go and talk to your family. I didn't even think. My first reaction was, I'm starting a new job, I need to tell him. And he was just brilliant. But that was the, and then I thought, oh, what about the kids? What about family? What about everything else? But what was it? The hardest thing for me during that So you get, in breast cancer, you go for your scan, then you've got to wait 2 weeks for your diagnosis. Mine was positive at stage 3, and then we had to wait another 2 weeks for a scan to see if it was going to be stage 4, which is terminal. Thankfully, it was stage 3, and we're all through it so far. There has been some complications, but the biggest thing for me was whether I shared that with people or not. Now, being me, you would understand I would need to share it because that's who I am. But I also didn't want that to become the whole conversation. So it's a little bit, if you go through IVF, went through IVF, if you talk about IVF, every second somebody asks you, are you pregnant? And it's like, oh, frig off, no, I'm not. If I was, I'd tell you. And it's a bit like cancer. It's the, are you all right? And I just can't, that's not me. It's like, no, I don't want to just put it over there. I've got to have a treatment. I've got to go through it, but I'm just going to get on with life because that's just over there. So that my biggest decision was, do I share it? And he decided I couldn't not share it because of my personality. So I took the decision actually that I would share the whole lot. And I videoed the whole period of a year of treatment. This was 2019. Before lockdown, I had a year of lockdown basically through chemo and radiotherapy and surgery. And then 2 weeks before lockdown, I got released. I was off and out, and my immune system was back up. And then we had lockdown, and my immune system collapsed, and I was stuck shielding. But the reason I talk about that in terms of bad days, there were many bad days during that. And anybody who's listening or watching who's had chemo, there's some really tough days. There was 2 weeks when I couldn't get out of bed. That's how fatigued I was through the chemo. Now, even wanting to go to the toilet, I couldn't get out of the bed. That's how physically drained I was. But what we did, so I told the staff, we agreed we'd work together, and I got a wellness room at work, and we scheduled when I'd be in the office and not depending on treatment. And we just worked as a team through it. And, you know, they got me through that whole process, but I shared things with them that you wouldn't ordinarily share, and sometimes a little bit too much, like pictures of my boob and things. But what we did do sensitively, as you'd imagine, we explained that I would be talking about it if people wanted to remove themselves because they've got their own scenarios or family and things going on. So I was very aware that there's a lot, you know, 1 in 2 people get cancer. There's a lot of people that will have connections. So I shared it, and there were many bad days. And what I took to doing in the really bad days, I had to shut off because it's extreme in cancer terms when you're going through chemo. But in some of the bad days, so some of the bad days, you just have to say it'll be better tomorrow. And same for work. You know, some days they're not great days, but you do know the next day's probably going to be better. And I've always thought, you know, in our sector, we're really lucky. We're just providing opportunities for people to do better through sport, whether that's being less lonely, more happy, healthier, more connected, feeling more valued, getting more confidence, losing a bit of weight. That's all we do in this industry. But isn't that amazing? If you can make somebody feel healthier, or make a friend, or become part of that community group that helps the kids run around the park, that's amazing. And that's what gets me out of bed. So no matter how bad I feel, you know, we do amazing work, and there's so much more amazing work that's needed in terms of the situation we have in this country at the moment. So I might have bad days, but they're not bad compared to some people's bad days. I'm really, really lucky. And as I say, I won't edit the bad days. I share them. And my staff will probably say, oh God, we heard about everything during cancer. We saw everything, we heard everything. But hopefully I know it because they share some of the things that they're going through as well.
And I'm so sad that we're running out of time, because I'd love to ask you a few more questions about that, but I'll hold back. But thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's really really
I can do 10 more minutes if that's all right.
All right, no, well, that's fine with me. I'd talk to you forever if I could, you know. but I'm just conscious on such a powerful point that you've just described there. It feels a shame to end it there. And there were so many things that you said, and one of the first things was you talked about it being your personality, so you had to share it. I think kind of when you say personality, I kind of thought values too, and I suppose that's all built up into personality, isn't it? So it just felt right, but I can understand why you'd be like, do I, don't I? And then it was like, no, I'm going to go all out, and I'm sharing all of it. And going back to your very first point about the depth of relationship you get with people when you start sharing and they start sharing back. So I guess and then towards the end there you were talking about what gets you through the bad days is, well, sometimes you just allow yourself to have those bad days and just switch off, and that's fine, and that's okay. And I can hear that you make it okay with yourself. But what I hear you say is there's two things that keep me going. One is my bad days. I mean, to be fair, Lisa, your bad days are pretty bad, right? Though I know you put this comparison, like there are other people are having worse days. I mean, it's great to have comparison, but to be fair, you know, I mean, what an attitude. Yes, I'm having a shit stage 3 cancer day, but surely there's people out there worse than me, you know. I mean, what an attitude. Love it, you know. But also there's this connection to the reason why you do what you do, you know. When you just talked about what we're doing, and I've got to get back to that, you know, I can kind of hear a real strong, I want to get back to that. I want to keep doing what we're doing and helping people. So that was really lovely to hear those strategies. And I just had a follow-up question in terms of, you talked about your team going, oh God, here she is showing us her boob again, you know, what's going on. But in all reality, in all seriousness, with you sharing that journey with them, tell me about the impact that had on the team. What's their feedback been to you? Has it been, Lisa, thanks for sharing, but I really wish you hadn't told us that much? Or has it been, oh my God, that was amazing? Yeah, I don't know, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I'm just very interested in that decision to share it.
Yeah.
Huge. What's been the response from the team since doing that?
It depends on the individuals. So there's not a team response. It's all individual. And I recall when I first told the senior management team, this is when you got to remember, I hadn't even started the job when I was diagnosed. So it was the first few weeks, and I waited until I knew whether it was terminal or not. You know, we would have probably made different decisions had it been stage 4. And I remember the first SMT. So these are people that I'd not met first week in the office. And there was one of the individuals who very traditional, very quiet, and proper. And I just said, look, I need to tell you something. Unfortunately, I need to talk about my breast cancer. And I didn't know at the time, because I was so busy trying to keep my emotions in check. I didn't look up and see the responses. But Chantel, who was one of the senior management team members, after the meeting said, oh my God, your first senior management team, you're talking about your tits. Did you not see so-and-so's face? And I was like, oh, really? And I hadn't even thought about what I was doing. It was just, I want to tell you. And the impact was just, for one of them, and we then spoke afterwards, it just struck them so much, because the previous chief exec was very different to me. And I just hadn't anticipated that level of, I guess, awareness and emotional understanding between us. So it was a real shock. So I know that was a shock, and then I had to build the relationship up and trust within it, because they were just like, oh my God, what's she going to say next? What's she going to talk about next? So that was one of the members. But what was interesting, two of the members of staff came to talk to me that they had family going through it. And they were giving me advice. Right. How lovely is that? A new chief exec, you know, confides in the staff team, and two of them, and I remember that so well, that they came and said, Lisa, look, do you want us to talk about it or not? Which is a good question. So I've talked about it, but do you want us to talk about it? And I said, I'm comfortable, but if I go quiet, you know, I'm struggling, because that's what I will do. I'll try and reflect it, if you like. So that was two of them. And then a couple of them went into overcare mode. And I had to say, just stop, I'm all right, you'll be okay. But there was lots of subtle things that they did individually, whether it was emails, there was cards, there was a lot of, from their side, emotional intelligence around me. So I don't know, as a team, I never asked them as a team how they felt. I kind of moved on. We had cancer, dealt with it, moved on. I know we had our AGM. So our AGM was in July, and I was coming to the end of my treatment, which was the worst part of chemo when you've done 8 rounds. And we'd scheduled the treatment the day after the AGM, because you've in a 3-week period on my chemo. Your first week's horrific, your second week you're feeling better, third week you're flying high as a kite, but you know that the next day you've got to have chemo again. And in that pre-week before chemo, you're taking steroids. So I'm on steroids, I'm high as a kite, because woohoo, I'm through that last 3 weeks, and I know tomorrow's going to be bad, but actually this is great. And we had our AGM, and our chairman, our president is Royal Highness the Earl of Wessex, Edward. And when you go through chemo, you lose things, you can't control things. You're feeling sick constantly, you can't control things in both areas. and I'm on steroids, and I've got to head up this conference, introduce him, and you get brain chemo fog. You forget people's names, and this is a fact. All I could think about is I can't remember his name, and I have to be on stage, and everything might go. And there was all this going on. I thought, I've got to talk about it. So I told the team, be ready with food, because I had to eat constantly to stop myself feeling sick. Water, because my temperature was up and down all over the place. And if I'm losing my words, can one of you be ready to step up, because this might happen? None of that happened at all, but they were very aware of everything going on, and I could see them in every area covering me. HRH was aware, and we talked through it all and everything else. But it was that I just felt a big team hug. I knew, you know what, if I peed on stage, I peed on stage, it would be fine. If I'd have pooed on stage, it'd have happened. If I'd have called him a different name, somebody would have joked or somebody would have come up. And again, that shows vulnerability, but it also shows the question about the team, how they felt. They were just with me, and they understood that they could help at whichever point that might have been. They could have helped. As I say, I didn't need them in the end in that respect, but it just brought back your question around individually how they responded and collectively as a team.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's what an incredible story, and thank you for sharing all of that. It just blows my mind, and also thank you for keeping such a straight face as my cat decided to make an appearance on the I had to mute myself because he was just meowing all the way through what you were saying, so, so I had to mute it, because this is like a brilliant story Lisa is sharing, Felix. So anyway, so thank you for sharing that, and I think, yeah, beautifully described both the individual and the team response and the impact it had on you, and also what you were able to do to introduce, you know, again, we sort of started talking a little bit about Royal and the Royal face and all of that. We've ended on Royals, and I think that's a really nice way to begin and end, really, in terms of you, how you're able to be you, warts and all, poo and all, pee and all, steroids and all, introducing a Royal, but backed by your team. I think it's just a great summary of you and what makes you great. So thank you so much for spending so much time with me and sharing you, warts and all, with me. Yeah, it's just been a joy chatting with you. Thank you.
Likewise, Steph, it's always a pleasure to chat to you and for you to analyse me and give me that feedback. So thank you so much. And your cat.
Yeah, and the cat. So always, he's got a feature somewhere, hasn't he? Thank you, Lisa.